And that's not insignificant. What I do find, though, is that one of the things Sanders did, which I do blame him for, is that he did it twice, the election of Donald Trump as a rationale to sputter the independent strength of his movement to create a popular front strategy with the Democratic Party out of fear of seeming that he was trying to neutralize the Democrats in the face of the fear of Donald Trump. And I resented him for that because I didn't believe that the Democrats deserved that support. And I believe that it weakened. I believe that if Bernie Sanders had stuck to his guns to try to make his version of the left as rigorous as possible in both 2016 and 2020, we would have a much more robust, at least democratic socialist left or socialist left in real world terms, not just online, than we have right now. That's where I go with that. And I'd like to hear Ben and everyone else's response. Maybe this is a controversial subject. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm pretty skeptical, but I just, I think that if there were I guess it depends what the scenario is supposed to be, right? Like what does that concretely look like? That's always my question, right? With all this stuff, so because obviously if there was a way to will into existence a real viable Labor Party, Socialist Party that could actually seriously contest for power with the other parties, then yeah, let's do that, right? For sure. I'm a little skeptical. I think that the sort of socialist left as it currently exists, I worry that that's what it could create. Sure, it could create a more socialist branded version of the Green Party, right? I just don't know what that would do for anybody, right? I'm very skeptical that there's any scenario where we could get a real viable third party other than something that maybe looks like how the Republicans came about in the 19th century. That there's.
I would go this far with you though. Yeah. Even if you don't even want to separate from the Democratic Party, he could have caused a left flank of the Democratic Party that was so strong that it would have forced the corporate centrists to capitulate more to him than necessarily him always capitulating to them.
Maybe. I'm just not entirely sure what that would look like. I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong, right? I'm just saying, to me, I don't really have a very concrete idea.
Vaughn, what do you think?
I mean, my skepticism cuts a different way. I've always been, a long debate between Ben and I, and when I say long, I mean since about 2014 is what would be the conditions of dealing with the Democratic Party, because on one hand, I completely agree with Ben. The last thing we need is a third party running for the national electorate first. That strategy has worked all of kind of once, and not for left wingers. Actually, the two times I can think of it is the Bull Moose Party and then Ross Perot. Arguably, the Socialist Party would have done better if the Bull Moose Party had not been running against them in 2019. That was the year. That's the only year in the history where you have not one but two parties outside of the two main parties getting more than 5% of the vote. And then you get it again with 10% or something with Ross Perot, but his own shenanigans and him dropping out and going back in hinder his ability to pull more.
Ross Perot is a really weird example, by the way, because there was a point in the 1992 election when he was actually winning in the polls.
Right.
It's hard to know.
And then he dropped out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild.
So there might be a path here, which is that you have a billionaire.
yeah. You have the exact kind of person that we can't get. As you get social
exactly.
But on the other hand, I do think the Popular Front with the Democratic Party was a disaster in that it was really used to revitalize the Democratic Party, not to revitalize the left flank. I saw DSA talking points co-opted, but not in a way where the DSA could set the agenda around how it was co-opted. So you'd see these radical flashpoints of Medicare for all or whatever was popular of the week being re-brought in. I think we do have to look at the fact, I was going to say something about like the identity politics dividing line. I, unlike Ben, don't think it ever went away. It was getting more effective pushback between 2014 and even I would even say before Sanders, between 2014 and 2020.
Yeah, and to be clear, I agree with that, right? Like I don't think it went away, but I think that it was like less dominant for a minute, and now it kind of seems to be coming back.
Well, it's coming back, because frankly, the Bernie left has been so thoroughly liquidated and at war with itself. I mean, the Bernie diaspora is sort of like a perennial problem for the left today. I mean, you look at the coalition you look at who Michael Brooks kept from chopping each other's fingers off or whatever he was doing and keeping us getting along. And he was doing it by the pure power of his personality. God bless him. Hardly anyone else could do that.
Although I would just say, I do agree that a lot of it was Michael's personality, but I also do think some of it was just the historical moment, right?
Yeah, that's fair. I don't think Michael's personality would have done it in 2010.
Right.
But I don't think his personality would have been able to kept it alive if he had lived.
I've said that too, and
sure.
gotten a lot of pushback on that.
No, I mean, I think it would have been, better, right? Because, but like, yeah, would it have, would it have like stopped all of the people who've like gone to war with each other over stupid bullshit from doing that? Some of them, sometimes, most of them, probably not, right? I mean, like, I think there are larger forces.
Let me tell you something. That shit was very damaging.
Yeah.
All of that forced to vote shit. That shit was profoundly. And I don't even talk about the idea itself.
Yeah, the idea is whatever, right? But
the idea is irrelevant. I'm talking about the internecine left war. All of that left podcast beef. That's why I hate that beef shit so much, Gene, quite honestly. That shit was profoundly damaging.
I always think of Gene's description of Force the Vote as the Lebanese Civil War for podcasters.
Yeah.
I
mean, the other thing about Force the Vote that always struck me
pointless.
Yeah, right, exactly, right. And it's like the thing that was always amazing to me about it, to Pascal's point, was that it's like whatever you think about it, like whatever. Like I'm so beyond sick of like thinking about it, like the actual substance of it. But it's like whatever you think about it, people gave it the emotional valence of like a reform versus revolution debate, or like whether to like vote for like war credits in the Reichstag in World War I or something like that. And it's like literally this is an argument about whether a few members of Congress should have tried a particular parliamentary maneuver at a given time, whether you think they should have or they shouldn't have. I mean, there's a really bizarre and telling disconnect between the sort of level of emotional fervor that got pushed into it and what the actual issue was, right? I mean, that this is this point of high principle, whether to, anyway, whatever. It seemed like, I mean, this is me agreeing with Pascal. I think it's just a very, very strange episode, but maybe a telling episode, because it was like, I think a lot of people decided that it was like the first thing they could like make, that they could do in some sense, although there was really no doing. There was just podcasting, right? Like there was no action out in the world that went with it, right? But like it was the first thing that people thought they could do since the Bernie campaign. And I think it was maybe just, a symptom of that Bernie energy starting to dissipate and sort of fly around in weird directions.
Yeah, I think we're going to see the left continue to disintegrate. And I don't mean to sound like the doomer here, but like as a person who spent the last year reading all about the cycles of the left since 1940 to try to come up with some kind of understanding better than what I've seen of the three on offer as the postmortems of the the millennial left, the Bevins, the Catrone, the Jaeger and what's his face, the Italian guy. And I think all those books have some benefit, but they're all very of the now. And comparing us to the New Left is actually somewhat instructive because the New Left has a similar trajectory.
I think it gives the millennial left way more credit. I mean, I would never compare the millennial left to the new left. I mean, when was there anything like the year of 1968 for the millennial left?
There isn't. But it's important to compare them anyway because the patterns are the same and the leaders are the same people. Bernie came out of the same movement. I mean, Bernie's basically no offense to Ben, who's a bigger Bernie fan than me, but Bernie is sort of the last little dregs of the new socialist movement that came after the new communist movement, that came after the new left, that he was just the last person standing from that movement that still had any sway whatsoever when he started ascending in the late aughts to the national stage. But you're right, Pascal, in that it was always a farce because you're instigating your instigating moment for the new left is the civil rights movement and the reemergence of a bunch of Marxian, not Marxists, the Marxists had all been blacklisted, but Marxian professors from the Midwest in the middle 60s, jumping on that and leading up to the protests against Vietnam, and then all these national liberation movements popping off, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas today, like our iteration of that is the recession. So that's a little different, which came after the anti-war movement of the aught teens and the Obama failure, and then Occupy. And then we get something like a McGovern campaign and the Bernie campaign. And then you see the same things happening. So what happens in the late 70s with the new left is it breaks down along sectarian lines, and both the new communist movement and the larger socialist movement either check out and get into their own media glitches, or they go to war with each other. Like in some cases in the new left, because the stakes were so much higher, we're talking about people actually assassinating each other and shit. Like we're not talking about that today. We're talking about podcasters being bitchy on the internet. So it is like a as farce version of a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of it's there's a lot of stuff that had to be state tactics in the 70s that are self-administered now. I mean, I remember Megan Day telling me a few years ago that she'd been reading this book about the state repression of the new communist movement in the 70s, and they talked about how like the FBI would like put all of this effort into convincing one group to devote their entire like next issue of their newsletter to talking shit about another group, and then they would like the FBI agents would mail the newsletter and all the members to make sure that they saw it. And it's like, man, like so much of what the FBI used to do is redundant now that we have social media.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the self fight. I mean, it's just so much easier to fight with social media
now when you
don't need COINTELPRO anymore. All you need is the internet connection and a good DSL.
Yeah, exactly. Well, before we do that, we have former vice presidential candidate for the Green Party, Angela Walker, coming on now to wish Pascal
Yeah.
happy birthday.
Hey, Angela, what's up?
Hey,
Welcome.
happy birthday, Pascal! Oh my
Thank you
goodness!
so
Hey,
much.
everybody.
Hey, welcome to the show. Do
Well-
you have any thoughts on this particular moment and the the left media drama and are we rerunning the new left, but like a stupider version of the new left? Speed running it.
Well, that's not a small question. I think I remember 4 years ago when we ran on this idea of left unity, and I think that that's super important right now. And I'm not talking about a time when everybody needs to sit, hold hands, and I'm sure y'all covered this. Holding hands and singing Kumbaya and we're all buddies. Nobody's asking for that. What we need to find the things that we overlap across the board on and unify around those points. Like, this is a perfect moment for us to really push the and guide the narrative around things like universal health care. You've got workers rising up. Let's talk about unionizing. Let's talk about worker rights, like across the left. And like, I don't think it's a matter of us all having to agree on every little point. Let's find the big things that we agree on and unify around those points. Maybe it's 3 big things: UBI, universal basic income, housing for all, or Medicare for all. I mean, pick a couple things and unify the left around that.
Do you think social media though is making that more difficult? Because on one hand it helps people connect, but it also makes it a lot easier for people to get into all kinds of drama, whether it's on their Facebooks or on their Twitters. People are out there mowing each other over relatively unimportant political differences.
I think social media, as you're saying, we have culturally in this country a very, very short attention span. And we have a very, very short historical memory. And so I think it'll be like, proverbial or herding cats to get people to like pick a couple of big things that the left can really coalesce around. And like I said, people are going to have their silos. They're going to have their affinity groups. They're going to have whatever else they're involved in. But what are these major things that we can unify around and push those things? And maybe have talks about ideological differences at a later date, but can we get something that we all unify on? I think it's possible. But like you're saying, social media, there's always something to distract us. And I think as leftists, one of the biggest important things that we have to know is that that's intentional. They're going to make sure that you, for the reasons that we just said, you're not coalescing around these certain issues or picking a thing that the left might want to unify around. That's where the distractions come in. We have to know that. We know what COINTELPRO is. We know, counterinsurgency. We know the things that have been done. And we should expect them to be throwing things in our way to keep us distracted. So.
Okay, panel. Who's the federal agent on the left?
Oh shit! Please, I don't think we need one.
I'm not. I was gonna say I'm not fed jacketing anyone because we can probably do it to ourselves.
Yeah, we would probably do the fed jacketing to ourselves.
Well, yeah, I have I do have a strong suspicion about somebody who regularly appears on leftist podcasts who I believe, I'm going to prepare my dossier of evidence, has worked in the American federal government.
Oh yeah. Well, you're gonna have to tell us that offline.
No. I'm gonna do my exciting announcement. It's the Cuba Brzezinski.
Oh yeah, it's Cuba. Yeah, of course, because Cuba literally did work.
The joke here would be that this is very openly. So yes,
of the deep state.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's interesting. How do you feel about that, C. Derek Vaughn? Do you think the left needs to unify around a few big what they used to call transitional demands, perhaps.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
because honestly, if I have to go on Twitter anymore and see people fighting over Trotsky and Stalin anymore, it's like, it's irrelevant because the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. So it's completely irrelevant.
I'd also say, by the way, if I just jump in, like transitional demands is a really weird phrase to use here, because the idea of an actual transitional demand is that it's something that, like, in like a pre-revolutionary situation, you throw out, like you raise it because you know that the powers that be won't be able to fulfill it because it goes beyond what you could accomplish in capitalism. And so you then turn around and then go to the workers and say, oh, see, we need to overthrow capitalism because we can't achieve this within the current system. Right?
So Ben lets his Cliffite understanding of transitional demands be known. But
Okay,
anyway,
all right. Tell me the correct.
No, I don't have a correct line. I'm not a Trotskyist, so I don't believe in transitional demands at all. But
no, I'm just saying, it's like, if that's what a transitional demand is, then it seems very hard for me to see how that maps onto the situation in like America in the 2020s.
No, well, I mean, you know the whole thing about Marx telling his his son-in-law, I am not a Marxist, about Guaide and the French socialists trying to do the same thing, make a bunch of demands that couldn't be delivered on to radicalize people, and Marx goes, that's a terrible idea because they're just not going to trust you.
Right, exactly. No, I mean, I totally agree with that. I'm just and also it is actually legitimately funny that you know me well enough to be able to correctly source where I got this stuff in the first place like 30 years ago.
Your understanding of traditional demands. Yeah, my take on that, Gene, and I guess I would agree with Angela to a certain degree. I'm a programmatic unity kind of guy, and that just means you figure out what the workers want as key program points, and you agree on those points, and then everything else we can fight over later. But, like, I'm not big on like ideological unity because we're never going to have it. Like, I mean, even on this panel, there's 5 of us. We're friends. We don't get along. I've never stabbed Ben. It's never occurred to me to stab Ben. Not even a little bit.
Sounds like it occurred you to stab Ben.
But we couldn't get ideological unity here. Sure. But that's not even the point. Like, the point is we should be able to focus on some key things that we'd think would help workers and would help build something towards up socialism. And I want to go back to something Pascal said, and maybe it'll add to what Angela was saying. In 2000 and I think 18, that Pew poll that showed that socialism was actually like 40% not scary among young people anymore. When that poll was redone in 2022, what that poll indicated was socialism has gotten back to being unpopular, although it's still more popular than it was before 2012. But capitalism is more unpopular, which is a little bit scary to me because I start thinking about what people think alternatives to capitalism that are not socialism. I'm like,
fascism.
Most of those are bad. Like, fascism, feudalism,
feudalism would be the actual alternative to capitalism. It's not socialism, but yeah.
So I was just like, okay, what that indicates to me is whatever happened between 2018 and 2022, the left failed to be able to address not Trump winning, but the Democrats winning. And that failure actually had repercussions elsewhere. And it's a weird thing to say because theoretically, some of us, not myself, but some of us were aligned with the Democrats, and at least one of them wanted Trump to lose. I mean, I kind of wanted Trump to lose, but in my world, I wanted everybody to lose. I mean, like, I voted for Howie Hawkins, for God's sake. So like,
does that mean you voted for Angela as well?
Yes, it does, actually.
See, Angela, we got an Angela voter on here.
I think that Warner saying something great. He's making a very, very he's laying down a gauntlet here. Is that the victory of Joe Biden in 2020 weakened the left. I don't think that's unfair. I don't think that's an irrational statement. Angela, what do you think about that?
I can agree with that. I think that and so many people have said it. So many people have said it where when a Democrat is elected, people feel like they can relax. They can go to sleep. The urgency is over. People can, you don't have to fight anymore. Our person won. And even now I'm having, debates not debates, but discussions with people whose politics are reasonably within the range of things that I deal with, even though they're Democrats. They believe in that the party can be worked with or whatever. And they don't understand that a Harris victory is just as dangerous as a Trump victory. And it's like you just said, like, we were screwed either way. So I think that Biden winning, anytime we get a Democrat in office, people feel like they don't have to fight. And they forget that Black Lives Matter was born under a Democrat, that Ukraine is happening under a Democrat, that there is in Gaza, there's a genocide in Sudan, and he has this nasty little tentacles in. All of this stuff is happening under Democrats. And so people have to be shaken really hard to realize that this duopoly, you're not winning as a working class or cash poor person. You're not winning. You're not going to win under this. And a lot of people don't want to hear that.
So I have a question, Angela. Like, I hear a lot of people saying that, and I'm definitely not going to deny that there's truth to that, right? But I do wonder, right? Because like the flip side of that back to brunch narrative that people think they don't have to fight when there's a Democrat in office is what you just said, right? You said Black Lives Matter was born under a Democrat, right? Occupy Wall Street happened under a Democrat. The first Bernie campaign happened under a Democrat. Like all of these things happened when Obama was in office, and so it seems like there was actually a lot of people fighting in a lot of ways under a Democrat, and in fact, you could argue, right? I mean, this would be, and I'm not saying like this is definitely right, because I think that like honestly, the tea leaves are mixed enough. You can kind of read what you want into it, right? But like I think that the flip side would be to say, well, look, when there's a Republican in office who, like anybody with kind of left of center instincts, can just say, oh, that guy is just obviously so horrible. You can sort of blame everything on like him individually, right? That was definitely true about George W. Bush. That was definitely true about Trump. Whereas when there's like, somebody like, Obama, who was seemed like this very like pleasant, constitutional law professor, unless you paid attention to what he did, right, in office, say, okay, well, clearly these bigger problems in American society, that stuff like Black Lives Matter or Occupy Wall Street was like rising up against, like clearly aren't just about the wrong guy being on the top. Maybe there's something like more systemic wrong here. Whereas when you have somebody like Trump in office, I mean, one question is like, okay, look, why did Biden win in the first place? Like not the general election. Like why did he beat Bernie in 2020? And it seems like a big part of the reason is, it wasn't because primary voters didn't want Medicare for all. There's actually a lot of exit polling on that showed that they did want Medicare for all, right? It's that people thought that Biden was the safest bet to beat Trump. Right? I think not what I thought, but it's what they thought, right? And so you can, like, the flip side of the back to brunch thing is like, well, look, when there's like a ostentatiously horrible right-wing Republican in office, a lot of people are going to be so like all they want is to get back to normal, right? Whereas sometimes when there's a Democrat in office, you get these bigger things like Occupy Wall Street, the Bernie campaign, all that stuff, because people see, okay, the problem isn't just who's in the top slot. There's a deeper problem. I'm sorry, Gene, I cut you off.
No, I mean, I think it speaks to there's a kind of strategic problem there for the left, because you can, like what Angela said is true, and what you said is true. Both of those things are true, and it seems to me like on a certain level, for example, like as left-wing movements grow under a Democrat, they tend, not intentionally, to facilitate the election of a Republican because they split the kind of you demoralize the Democratic Party vote. That's what we saw last election. People mobilized for Gaza. That was maybe not the main factor, but a factor in, I think, Kamala Harris,
which is also a really interesting example. That's like the biggest pro-Palestinian protests I've seen in my entire lifetime.
Oh yeah,
it's happened under a Democrat. Like that's interesting, right?
It's interesting. But then we end up with a Republican elected, and then under Republican, everyone is playing defensive because it's like every election, every election, the left wing quote unquote argument to vote for the Democrat is to stop fascism, and people have been saying that since Reagan or even before, I'm sure, but I mean, I don't know.
Way before Reagan. I mean, read Hal Draper as an essay from the '60s where he's talking about how every 4 years people call the Republican a fascist.
Fascist, exactly. So we have this kind of conundrum where there is a political space under the Democrats that allows for like mobilization and organization beyond the vistas of the Democratic Party for more kind of radical types of politics, Medicare for all, Occupy, Gaza protests, what have you. But at the same time, that what I've seen, at least in the last couple of election cycles, is that that sort of demoralizes an element of people who might vote Democrat, and then they will, and then you get a Republican, and then we get this like we have to stop fascism. It's a real difficult conundrum to overcome because I used to be of the opinion that in 2016 I was in favor of supporting Hillary over Trump, on the basis that, a lot of mobilization, you had the water protectors, you had all this kind of stuff that was percolating up under Obama. And I was like, well, if we have Trump elected, we're just going to have this fight against fascism. Perhaps that space will continue to move. Right. But, ultimately, the left isn't a big enough section of American society to do anything. So when the left pulls out of the Democratic Party coalition, which I'm not saying that's a wrong thing to do, I'm saying, but when they do, that will elect a Republican, and then we end up in fight fascism mode. So I feel like there's a kind of Kobayashi Maru for all you Star Trek fans out there. It's like a kind of like a damned if you do, a damned if you don't, because ultimately we are kind of like leftists are kind of like not a powerful section in society. I mean, and I think a lot of energy ends up being expended on electoral politics. People put their hopes on this electoral politics where, I mean, I'm of the opinion, and maybe people disagree with me on this, but I'm like, as a leftist, like this last election, someone's like, well, what a liberal a friend of mine was like, well, you should support the Democrats because they're closer to your opinions than the Republicans. I'm like, I just can't care that much. Like, I just don't care that much because, frankly, the left, rather than spending my time worrying about like whether Trump will be elected or not, the left should probably be focusing on building up the organs of civil society. Now, how do you do that without a vibrant workers' movement? I don't know. When you had movements such as the German Socialist Party, which had this huge imprint in civil society before the First World War, these clubs, all these things, you had a workers' movement. Now, you have, the spokespeople for the left, especially in left media. I'm not talking about labor union leaders, but the spokesman for like, quote unquote, the left in left media are downwardly mobile professional managerial classes. People like me, Vaughn's upwardly mobile PMC. Sam Burgess is, are you downwardly or upwardly mobile PMC?
I'm about to say, like,
I am start the trajectory.
I am one, I don't believe in the PMC thesis, but two, even if I did, I would be. I'm from a working class background, and I am PMC myself, but I'm not from there. One thing I would say about about this that I think like it's come up, just thinking about what Angela said and what Ben said, is if we ask ourselves, well, what's the difference between Biden and Obama, and except Obama being A, more popular than Biden ever was, and B, Biden being about a bajillion years old. Most of the stuff we described that you're describing, Ben, happened in the second term.
Yeah.
Where there was a beginning of rumbling at the end of the first term, but everyone shut up so we could beat the far rightist Mitt Romney. Whereas we only started to see the left start to say something to the Biden administration after 3.5 years, and it took Gaza to do it. I will say I saw more people from even Jacobin carrying water for the Biden administration than I saw for Obama. I saw even first-term Obama critics carry water for the Biden administration. And I guess part of that had to do with the perception that somehow Trump was worse than Bush, which I actually, as an analysis of history, find, at least off of the first term, maybe a little weird, given how many,
I will say I'll pull my Jacobin card here and say that I have never heard anybody associated with Jacobin express that thesis.
Bashkar multiple times said that Biden was the most progressive president since FDR.
Right. No. The Bush-Trump one.
Oh, no. I don't think I don't think that's Jacobin's fault.
Yeah,
that seems to be a general.
I'm just saying, I don't think anybody at Jacobin thinks that. I mean, I think that in a certain sense, look, everything I ever wrote about Biden for Jacobin was like extremely glass half empty, right? Like I think you'd be hard pressed to find me saying anything even slightly nice in there. But
no, you didn't, and neither did Bronco. I will give you two both that.
But none of this is to say that, look, I mean, there's a certain, I think FDR is going a little far, but it's like, LBJ, I mean, it's kind of true, right? Like it's not, that it's, I think it's like, the William F. Buckley line about Michael Harrington, right? Where he says that Michael Harrington was the most prominent socialist in the United States, which is a little bit like being the tallest building in Wichita, Kansas, right? Like being like being the most like
being the thinnest person at Golden Corral is the
one. Yeah, exactly, right. So it's like being the being the sort of most social democratic administration in several decades in the United States. I mean, the bar is just in the gutter, right? Like I was never able to get excited about it, right? But I think that even with the crushing of the rail strike, overall, I mean, I think if you run the math, it probably is true. I mean, it's all the LBJ comparison is apt too, because he also had a genocide / sized asterisk on that record.
Yeah, well, actually, if they had made the LBJ comparison, it probably would have been more clarifying to what was about to happen. I don't know. I'm gonna let other people talk. I just find it. I mean, today, what are we watching today? I mean, in preparation for Trump coming into office, we're seeing a blue state crush a legal union doing what I think is a legal strike. I mean, how many Amazon workers got arrested today? I mean, quite a few. And I mean, one of the things that makes all this more hard to sell, and it's going to be hard for the left to deal with, I think, and I don't know what we're going to do, is if you call a man a fascist for, I don't know, 8 years, and then you immediately pivot to collaborate with him, it does kind of hurt the accusation of fascism. Or it either makes it seem like you didn't really believe he was a fascist, which, okay, I don't think they really did, or that you don't care. And I don't know how that, I mean, like, for us, it does make the strategy a lot harder going forward to say, how do you deal with the Democrats after they've done that? Because if we see, New York governors, Democratic New York governors, letting people crack down on the Amazon union today, seemingly doing stuff that wouldn't have happened even a couple months ago when Biden was more of a viable. Well, I mean, now that the administration is a lame duck, what do we say to that? What do we say to that? And the other thing that's happened is the Democrats, despite losing, have doubled down on being an oligarchy of gray hairs. They're like I live in Utah, so I can make this comparison. They're kind of like the LDS apostles. They're literally a gerontocracy where the oldest person who can like sit up and make a cogent sound is given leadership. And I don't know, like if they really believed their rhetoric for the past 8 years, why would they do that? I think even the general public has to go. They don't really believe it. And instead of it being like, hey, we should go to the left, they're just like, well, maybe that Trump guy wasn't so bad, even though we all hated him 4 years ago anyway. So, yeah.
Angela, any thoughts on that point?
No, I was actually watching the chat. I have no Uggs, sir. Or ma'am. There will never be Uggs in this house. Those are Doc Martens. Thank you. That will never happen. Yeah. I was laughing at your crack. I'm former LDS, so I was laughing at
Okay,
that was spot on. But yeah, I'm just listening.
Yeah. You guys see The Heretic, by the way?
Yeah, I have. I mean, I live in Utah. How could I avoid it? Like,
what do we foresee is coming up in the near future with the coming rise of Donald Trump? Anybody have any prognostication?
More Republican stuff, like the stuff that Republicans would do, except Trump's going to do it on Twitter, I guess.
What do we make of Trump basically trying to lay down the gauntlet with the Speaker of the House?
I mean, I think all this stuff about, I don't think like Trump is going to do all this national conservative stuff or like whatever. Maybe we'll get some child tax credits, but I don't know about that. I don't know if that's going to happen. I just think he's going to do what he did last time, and have do tax cuts, deregulation, and stuff that any Republican, what's his name? What was the guy called? The one who looked like a psycho? Paul Ryan, was it? The speaker, that the Ayn Rand guy who was like Speaker of the House.
Yeah, Paul Ryan.
It's like Trump's going to do that stuff, except he's going to do it more clumsily. I mean, I don't see the Republicans doing anything that Republicans wouldn't do. Like if Trump wasn't there, if Republicans were elected without Trump, I pretty much think their program would be by and large similar. They might have some different people in the positions, but I don't think this, as much as Kennedy might be a little bit of a lunatic, I mean, he has some good ideas on improving the food stuff, getting all these chemicals out of the food. That's great. But I don't think that's going to happen because I don't think Republicans are going to sign off on new regulations to improve the quality of food in this country. So I don't think anything that you wouldn't see under another Republican will happen under Trump. We may get some more foreign policy chaos. You might, I just feel like Trump's not different from Republicans.
Oh, yeah. I don't know.
I mean, there's stuff that people are freaking out about that we've seen Republicans do over and over again, like I was pointing out, they're like, Trump is threatening to kill the Department of Ed. And I'm like, every Republican since Goldwater has threatened to kill the Department of Ed.
I mean, literally, this is something that my mother-in-law's mother talks about all the time, about closing the Department of Education, about, all these big cuts people are talking about. That's stuff that Republicans talk about anyway, right? Isn't that, is there anything different here? Am I missing something?
Well, I mean, I guess the things depends which, look, what you're saying is pretty much the train I've been on for the last several years. This was what the fascism, debate was about, right? and I mean, I always had the position that pleased the fewest people, which is that I didn't think Trump was a fascist, but like I did think it was good for him not to be president because, even though he's not a fascist, he's a Republican, and
If
actually,
anything, Trump's going to be a moderating force on the Republican Party because I don't think Trump.
maybe. So I was
Oh,
going
I don't know about that.
to say the flip
Maybe.
side here is that I do take seriously the point that Kuba and I made in our article about this, that he's been talking about, that it could be that that he could end up being more competently authoritarian this time around because I think specifically some of the plans to fire a lot of career bureaucrats and, possibly clear out a lot of the obstruction that happened last time. So I don't know that like what he was able to do last time is the outer limits of what he's going to be able to do this time. I would also point out, as far as stuff that he's talked about, he spent so much time talking about mass deportations that I have a really hard time seeing him not feeling the need to at least make some kind of show of like dramatically escalating deportations from where they already are, which, by the way, under Biden, I mean, there's all this mythology that like, he opened the border or whatever, but I mean, like the numbers under Biden have already been crazy. And like, so I think Trump would feel the need to like do something to like really dramatically, obviously ratchet up. He's talked about, using the military for that, which if he did, I think could get like super ugly. Also, speaking of the military, I mean, something he's talked a lot about. And I mean, of course, with Trump, God knows, because like, Trump says he's going to do lots of things. He doesn't do them, right? But like, he's also talked about designating the cartels as officially as foreign terrorist organizations, so we could do like, drone strikes or maybe even troops, down here. So I don't know. I mean, will any of that happen? I have no idea, but I'm not confident that that Trump round 2 won't include some sort of luridly horrible stuff that we didn't see last time.
I think the tariffs are another issue that we're going to have to actually watch, because that's totally within the president's power to do. He's threatening tariffs that I don't see any way he'll do, because it would collapse it wouldn't just collapse Canada or Mexico's economy, it would also collapse ours. But I still think he's going to do some of them. Another thing one of the things I find interesting about this current gamemanship is I was like, okay, it seems like he's thrown Elon Musk under the bus within 24 hours. So that chaos is going to be interesting. By that, I mean, like, he was leaking to the press that Elon was the person leading to them to reject the deal that the Republicans had them come back in. And then today he's already calling for, getting rid of the debt ceiling altogether. So he's like pivoted right and left, like to extreme positions within 24 hours. And then associated, the richest man in the world who's already associated with his cabinet with taking a position he's already turned against within 24 hours. So, and I tell people to watch Trump and everything, because I was listening to liberals. We should be careful when we listen to liberals, because, they like all this shit. This is their entertainment. But they're like, oh, well, Elon bought the presidency. And I was like, my friends, have you guys ever seen anyone in a Trump administration who wasn't Trump's family to survive unscathed the administration? We have 4 years. We saw what he did to all of his beginning cabinet. I don't know what you think is going to happen this time. Do you think he's so fundamentally different that you've forgotten what he was like 4 years ago?
Yeah, I think there's a point to be made about, how absurd it is that you have this, billionaire who's being quite this out front and like openly like playing the role that he's playing, but also that Democrats can't really make that critique, for obvious reasons, right? So it's a little bit tough for them. But I would also say, by the way, we're talking about like crazy shit that Trump has said he would do, somewhat relevant to, a couple of us on screen, right? He also, like, the GOP platform that like it's got that big list of like all caps numbered points that I think, a couple people said reads like a list of Trump shower thoughts in there. One of them is all caps, deport pro-Hamas radicals and make campuses safe and patriotic again. So, there does seem to be some kind of suggestion there taken seriously of like a new Red Scare.
I don't know. If they deport me, it's a free trip. I'm okay.
Where would you like to be deported, Angela? If they're going to deport you, you have any suggestions?
You can send me to Mexico.
Yeah, I like Mexico.
You can send me to Cuba. You can send me to Bolivia. You can send me to Peru. Anywhere but this motherfucker. So I mean, I won't be offended. I really won't. I can drive a truck anywhere.
Yeah. Let's get them Tucson on because it's already.
Angela is the only person on this panel with actual useful skills.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's get M Tucson here because we're already at an hour in.
Where's M Tucson? Oh, here is M Tucson. She's here.
M Tucson, are you here?
She's on here. She signed on.
I see her, and it says that she's on, but I don't. Am I missing something?
I think we're missing space.
Nope. MT, are you here? No.
So
you there?
Does it only let 5 people on at once? I don't think so, but
she is on. So maybe she's just lurking. Oh, we've got a super chat. Happy birthday, Pascal. It
lets up to 10 people.
Well, MT is on. She's not sure why it's working. Well, MT, you're in the system. Make it work. Use the black girl magic that you have.
Sparkle fingers.
Anyway, no dead air, guys. No dead air. Don't dead air us.
Well, being that it's your birthday, Pascal, and I actually have you like right here, I don't know if you have been listening to all of the amazing house music that has been coming out of South Africa.
No, please
I am going to tag you on Facebook to Tandy Dry, to Cairo. There's a couple of other people. The stuff that they're making sounds like the world I want to live in.
Sounds interesting. Please do share. Well, listen, guys, I gotta take off, man. I gotta spend some time with the familia on the birthday. I wish Tucson was here, but I appreciate you guys having this show for me for my birthday. It was a great conversation. If you guys want to continue, you can go ahead and I'll pick up while you're talk.
No, we're past Pascal's bedtime, so I think we should all say bonsoir. And MT, your microphone is doing this now. There we go. I had to silence MT. But thank you everybody for joining us. I think there were still some more exciting shows coming up for the rest of the year. It's been a pleasure with C. Derek Vaughn, with Benjamin Burgess, and the formidable Angela Walker, the only person on the panel with a useful skill, and of course the birthday boy himself, the one, the only Pascal Robert. Happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
And as we say on TIR, we are
out.